Hi guys, I'm Carlos. Welcome to my channel. I am a professional astrologer and a yoga instructor. And today we're going to be looking at Lily Phillips' birth chart. If you haven't heard about it yet, she just become trending because she slept with 101 men in one night. She is obviously an Onlyfans star and an Instagram model. So because of everything that's been going around, everyone's been talking about it. So I think it was quite important and just to have a look at her birth chart and see if there's something in her birth chart that justifies her actions or justifies her way of being, her way of making money. And yeah, just wanted to explore this with you. So let's get on. So as we can see on her birth chart, just going through the basics. So obviously she was born on the 3rd of July of 2001. We can see that her sun is in Leo. It's just entered Leo. Her moon is in Virgo, and then we don't have her raising because we don't have the time that she was born. If we had the time where she was born, then we will be able to place the houses. We'll be able to see where her first house is. First house in astrology is your ascendant or your raising sign, which will really help us. But in this case, I think with what we have, it's quite obvious everything that's happening in here. So just starting with the basics. Sun in Leo, so we can see that it's someone that, well, the sun in itself represents your passion, represents what you're naturally good at. So when it comes to Leo, Leo is a part of being ruled by the sun itself. It represents an energy that is expansive, is an energy that is about sharing, just like the sun itself. It just irradiates light, irradiates warmth, and that warmth is felt by everyone around it. And that's exactly what happens with the energy of Leo. The energy of Leo tends to share, is a very, some people like to categorize Leo as individuals very egocentric and very self-centered. But the reality is that they themselves are really into the movie of their lives. So they completely understand that they are the protagonist of their movies, and that's how they live around it. So when the energy of Leo is placed and the energy of Leo is directed in a positive and correctly way, it can be a very inspiring energy. It can be a very sort of like a coaching, like a good coach, a good inspirer, someone to admire, someone that you have as an example to how to be in life. And in this case, we can see that her sun in Leo, it's obviously going around all her public face, right? It also represents a public face, and it represents how she has become so famous in such a short amount of time. It's just her charisma itself is someone that you can see that she is very outspoken, she's very straightforward, and that is something that it can be seen with her sun being in a Leo sign. Another thing to be looking at before we move into the moon. Mercury, as we can see, Mercury is the planet of the cognitive perceptions, how you process information, how your mind digests and process the information, and how you understand the situation itself, apart from the communication. How do you communicate with others? So obviously, when the Mercury is in a sign like Cancer, just to have a little bit of brief explanation of what the sign of Cancer is. So the sign of Cancer is also ruled by a luminary, is also ruled by not a planet itself, but just by the moon. And so it's quite important to have this as a reference, because we can see that her sun, so her masculine energy, is ruled by Leo, which is ruled by the sun itself, and it's a very fiery energy. But then when it comes to the communication, it's ruled by a more mellow, more settled, more feminine energy. And that's something that you can see. The perception of everyone sees her as a very good, like the good neighbor, like sort of like the girl next door energy that can be seen in the Mercury. The way she talks is a very soft way of talking. It's very sweet, very even innocent sort of energy that she just transmits with the way that she talks. What else we can see in here? We can see another important thing, that is Venus in her Gemini. Venus itself rules the relationships that you have with yourself, but mostly the relationship that you have with others. So of course, in this case, we can see that her Venus is in a Gemini. Gemini, it's a sign that it's very adaptable, it's very changing, it's constantly changing. It's also a sign that perhaps sometimes likes things that are out of the norm. And that's something that we can see in here. That already her likings, her way of exploring relationship with others can be seen as something that it's out of the norm and something very like adaptable and very changing. And that's exactly what she's been doing with her OnlyFans, right? She's been just bringing something new into the paradigm, bringing something new into the entire OnlyFans, just going beyond what's known as normal, if OnlyFans can be considered normal. Obviously, I respect anyone that does whatever of what they want with their bodies. But in this case, obviously, she's taking that to the extreme. Let's go through a more deeper understanding. So, for example, if we have a look at her moon. Her moon is placed in Virgo, and that's going to be quite important moving forward as we talk about the aspects of important planets. In this case, the moon rules your emotions. In regards of where your moon lands, so the sign of the moon, so the sign where your moon lands, it doesn't mean that you react in that way specifically. It's more of the sign of your moon is the characteristics of how do you behave when you're trying to protect yourself emotionally and protecting yourself when you feel a sense of insecurity. Now, in this case, we can see, now, what does this mean? So we know that Virgo is a very perfectionist sign. It's a sign that it's perfectionist because it has the capacity to see all the possible outcomes. So it's someone that, if we look at the zodiac wheel, we can see that from the party, super outgoing, super careless, super free sign and energy of Leo, we go through Virgo, which means that all that energy of expansive party, having fun, just carelessly, it's being more settled. No, it's like the energy of Leo has faced the consequences of their actions, and that's exactly what happens with Virgo. Virgo comes as in like, I understand that everything that I've done has some consequences, and now I want to measure all my steps in order to prevent negative outcomes. And that's exactly what the energy of Virgo is. Now, when it comes to moon, that's exactly what's happening in here, right? Is a way of, I want to measure every single inch of my actions in order to protect myself from a possible emotional attack or a possible like attack in any sense. Now, I want to speak of Mars because this is quite important. The planet of Mars, a part of showing your driving force and how do you take actions, how do you face uncertainty, how do you take the step forward when you're like, how is your way of acting when you're in a fight or flight mood? That's exactly what Mars is. Apart from that, it brings the sexual energy, is the sexual force. The main difference with Mars and Venus is that Venus is the more feminine energy, so is the sexuality from the feminine perspective, is more nurturing, more calming, is more passive energy. But when it comes to Mars, it's completely the opposite, is the masculine energy, sexual energy force. So it's an energy that goes forward, is your sexual drive essentially. And it's super interesting that her Mars lands in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius, a part of, we're now living in Sagittarius, now we're in Sagittarius season. Sagittarius represents the hand. It really represents the hand. Like the arch itself, the arrow that we can see in the symbol of the sign of Sagittarius, it essentially represents what I'm aiming to gain, what I am aiming to hunt, is that expansion vision of like completely. If Leo was a little bit of a careless and party outgoing energy, being the second sun, the second fire sign of the astrological zodiac, we have Sagittarius, which is the last fire sign of all the fire signs. So it means that that fire, that passionate, it's been measured in a very specific and very calculated way. And that's exactly what's happening here. Sagittarius are known for being very adventurous and very completely not measuring at all the repercussions of their actions. And when you have Mars in this sign, it's quite important because we can see that her sexual force, her sexual energy is driven in a careless way. Now, there's something here important because we can see Pluto. Now, Pluto is one of the most complicated celestial bodies in astrology to understand as an individual. Now, Pluto comes, well, it's called the wound of the physical body, and it's the trauma that your body carries throughout this reincarnation, throughout this lifetime. And it is something that throughout this lifetime we are going to have to integrate. It's quite similar to the North Node. The North Node will be more the life path that you choose to make. But when it comes to Pluto, is everything that has to die in order to be transformed. So it's the biggest trauma that you face, is all the traumas that you face in life. Is that quote that we say that you don't make a change till you hit rock bottom. That's exactly what Pluto is. And it's super interesting to see that Pluto in this case is also obviously a conjunct with Mars in also the sign of Sagittarius. So we can see that all this driven force, all this sexual energy, wave of energy, it's linked with the trauma of Pluto. Now, there's something here that we need to remark, and it's quite important because we can see a square. We can see a square with Mars and Pluto and the moon. So we can see here that when it comes to squares, it's an astrological aspect that it involves aspects in astrology represent the relationship, the current relationship. So we have transits that create aspects, and we have natal aspects. Obviously, because we are looking at her natal, we can see that she was born with a negative aspect, with a tension in between two celestial bodies, in this case 3 celestial bodies. So we have a tension in between the Mars and her moon and Pluto and her moon. So obviously we can see, hopefully, I don't know, it's just something me analyzing, is the way I analyze birth charts, but I can see that her actions, and in this case actions related to her sexuality, are going to bring some sort of trauma in her physical body and in her emotional body. Now, this is something to look more in depth, because when we see the square, we can see that the moon lands in Virgo, but Virgo, a part of being the ultimate perfectionist, it also rules the health. It rules your well-being, your health itself, not only mentally, but your health physically. So I'm a bit scared in this sense. I'm a bit worried that perhaps all this hypersexuality that she is constantly, exploiting in a way, it may affect her physical body in the future. Or if it's not her physical body, it definitely will carry some health consequences, whether it is emotionally or whether it is physically. And that's something, just, something that I was looking earlier, and I think it was one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, because it's quite interesting to see this aspect in particular in someone who is, an OnlyFans star. Other things that we can look at now, we can see oppositions. Obviously, I mean, if you see that all the 10 aspects in her birth chart are within her Mars and Pluto, which is super interesting. That you guys think? I mean, we have another opposition now. Opposition is another type of tense aspect. And obviously it means that two celestial bodies are completely opposed to each other. So they are not collaborating, and each other can see as the villain of each other. So they're constantly pointing each other's negative traits, and they're not really collaborating. Now, in here, we can see Mars forming an opposition with Venus. So obviously we can see here a completely broken dynamic within her masculine energy and the feminine energy. Now, when it comes to masculine and feminine energy, just because I am a woman, it doesn't mean that my feminine energy is more active in my body and I don't have any masculine energy whatsoever. It has nothing to do about it. Within ourselves, we have both poles, we have both polarities. As a woman, you have masculine energy in yourself and you have feminine energy in yourself. When you look at the birth chart, you can have an idea of what is more active in yourself. In myself, for instance, I am more masculine. So the masculine energy in my birth chart is more active than my feminine energy in the birth chart. And that's something that throughout this past year, especially with being in a relationship, I have had to start working with my feminine energy and feeling at ease and feeling comfortable, or even just meeting, just knowing, getting to know my feminine energy. And it's just been like such a beautiful journey. Anyway, in this case, we can see that that dynamic clashes. There's a part of herself, there's a part of her femininity that is clashing with the masculinity. And it's clashing for obvious reasons, because again, we have Pluto making this conjunction with her Mars. So it all has to do with her actions. So her actions are not aligned with her energy and her divine femininity. Obviously, we have another opposition, which is Pluto in this case forming also another opposition, this time with Saturn. Now, Saturn in astrology represents the rules, represents the norm. It really represents the true responsibility of your actions. And in this case, we can see that there is a clash in between her trauma, that in case it's been self-inflicted with the energy of Mars, that it will have some consequences. And those consequences are perhaps the lack of responsibility, or completely undermining the responsibility that your actions can carry. And that lack of responsibility can, moving forward, perhaps in the present, create some trauma and some emotional baggage that throughout the lifetime will have to be healed, will have to be looked after, and will have to be healed, essentially. So yeah, these are, I don't know, one of the biggest aspects that I wanted to look at. And I forgot to also mention another thing, which we can see another square with her moon and Saturn. So again, we have a clash in between the responsibility of anything that you do in life and the consequences of your actions with your moon. So we can see that that lack of responsibility of your actions will clash with how your moon. So in this square, what it comes to my mind is perhaps that lack of responsibility in your way of making decisions. It will affect your emotional, it will affect her emotional body, it will affect her emotionally, or even it can also, because we can see that Saturn, her Saturn is in Gemini. So again, Gemini, Saturn in a sign like Gemini is a very difficult way, because, you know, in a sense, in a way, we have Gemini that it's completely exploring new paradigms, exploring new things, touching new things, starting new things. And then I get bored about it, like starting things and not ending, like not fulfilling the reason why you started exploring this area of life or everything. It's like, for me, Gemini is the energy of a child that starts playing with something and then it leaves it halfway through and then starts playing with something else. And then you get home and the house is a mess because there's paints here, there's puzzles here, there's video games there. So it's like you get to explore and you're constantly trying to fulfill your mental needs. But when it comes to the reality, you're not really sinking that information. It's just like, you know, it's a momentarily pleasure, I would say, that Gemini energy can be sometimes. And of course, when it lands, so when you have Saturn in a sign like this one, obviously it means that you're not really looking, you're not really caring for the consequences of what these can involve. And of course, that lack of responsibility, that lack of, you know, structure within your decisions can be a way of sort of protecting yourself from some emotional trauma that you are carrying from, I don't know, perhaps family dynamics. Perhaps if we had the houses, we will be able to see how her family dynamic it is, but we don't have her time that she was born. So I'm just looking from the bigger picture. So yeah, that's what I can see, really. What else we can have a look at? Yeah, I would say like that's one of the biggest things. I mean, another thing that perhaps we can look at is we have Uranus. Uranus is an energy of expansion. So it's an innovative energy. So it's an energy that comes to break with the norm and just implement something completely new. And we can see that there is a trine, there's a very positive aspect with her way of being innovative. And you can see that that trine is just with her Venus and with her Saturn. So of course she is changing the structure of how things work, because of course we have Uranus in her Aquarius sign. Aquarius sign represents the community and represents the people and represents the community itself, just the people that you have around you and how you team up with these people. And you can see that she is really making use of that with her platform as Onlyfans. And it's just benefiting her, of course, because it's forming a trine with her Venus. So obviously her Venus, that sexuality, that femininity, that sort of image of girl next door, good girl, is just playing at her advantage in making all this money and making all this content that she's doing. But yeah, guys, that's me. Really, I don't know. Leave me in the comments if you have any other questions or if you have any other famous people that you want me to look at. But I think it's pretty plain. I think it's pretty obvious what's happening. And I think it's something that she was born to make these differences. She was born in order to, heal this trauma. Strongly believe that all these OnlyFans, all these 101 men in one day, even her now saying that she wants to make 1,000 a day, I think all of that has a reason. Yeah, guys. So I think that it's pretty obvious she was born with sort of like that mission to do. I don't know. I strongly believe that we as an individuals are born with a specific mission in order to not a collective mission, but more as a personal mission. And I think that's one of her missions that she's come here to do, perhaps to exploit her sexuality in a way that it will end up carrying a lot of emotional trauma and even physical trauma. But that's something she was born with. This contract is a karmic and a soul contract that she was born to do. I am nobody here to judge. I'm just analyzing the birth chart because as an astrologer, I'm very passionate about looking at these things, because as I can see, you can see it there. It's not that I'm lying. I'm not making up her birth chart. The numbers are there. The positions, astrological positions are there. And it's as obvious as you can see it. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, guys, as always, it's a pleasure to share this content with you. Leave me in the comments. What do you think? What do you think about this birth reading, like express birth chart reading about Lily Phillips? And yeah, let me know if you have any other famous people that you want me to analyze, and I'll do as much as I can, guys. Anyway, it's been a pleasure as always. I'll see you all soon. Ciao.